we're not so many people here, so perhaps you could tell me who of you could say you're front-end developers or back-end developers, or are you
Like to think I'm
full stack developer?
I like to think so.
Yeah, you like to think so?
Stack.
Sorry?
3/4 of stack.
3/4 of stack developer. Which
At the front end side, so
yeah.
half back end.
Okay. Well, you're from Finland?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I have to talk in English.
Preferably yes.
Yes. If you should understand, yes. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about an experiment or a ID that we tried in Sundsvall to handle front-end and back-end development a little bit differently with EPIserver, and shoot questions at any time. You don't have to say them until the end. I haven't done well. I have another skills than PowerPoint, but I'm going to mostly talk, and they are just a background. Well, I think I've seen a lot of problems with EPIserver, basically because EPIserver is, in my opinion, built for backend developers. It isn't built for front-end developers. Front-end developers want other things. They want things like control over the markup, which in many cases EPIserver doesn't provide because they have helpers that generate the markup for you. Also, EPIserver front-end developers want faster feedback loops. EPIserver is often painfully slow to work with, and it doesn't really work when you're working with front-end to wait 30 seconds to see the result of your last edit. Also in EPIserver, of course, you can do anything with EPIserver, but EPIserver in its vanilla shape, well, of course, it's a database, it's a controller, and it's a Razor templates. Razor's templates attract code. It doesn't have to be that way, but often it ends up a lot of code in the Razor templates. I've seen property criteria searches in templates and other things that really shouldn't be there, and that stops front-end developers from modifying them, because it's basically a back-end thing. It isn't a front-end thing anymore. That coupled with the EPI helpers and so on. But this talk is in the context of server-rendered HTML. It doesn't touch any like single app concepts or so, but it's the front end, where it's a back-end rendered templates. But I don't know what you're used to when you're working with. I guess you're working with EPIserver because you're here, yeah. And the front-end development, once you have front-end developers that are dedicated to front-end development, you need to work out some sort of order so you can work on your own. And for most that I've seen, front-end creates static templates like static HTML and CSS, and then they are done with the front-end work, and then the backenders need to insert that markup into Razor templates and make them generate correctly according to data. That's the principle I've seen. Have you seen others?
Well, in Finland, the front-end developers touch the view as well. So basically everything in the view is considered as front-end.
And you keep them.
If there are some simple loops and things like that.
Yeah, but you keep them. You keep them clean of code.
Mostly because
Yeah.
it is costly in computation.
Yeah.
So if you have some more logic in the view, it is always slower to like for the servers to serve the web pages if there's a lot of things in the view.
Yeah. But any of you done the static HTML and then import it into the EPIserver?
In some projects we start, like we might make some kind of mock-up where we can easily
Yeah. Because that could be troublesome with that setup, that everyone needs to run EPIserver in IIS. Many front ends want to use Mac.
Front-end developers would like to use Apple products.
Yes, for some reason.
There are some workarounds, it is to use Windows machines with EPIserver.
And often it isn't as simple as you would like to set up an EPIserver site on your computer. So there are a few problems. And another problem is that if you want the front end to own and take responsibility for the front end is kind of a part of the back end. They can't use Node.js or the SAS building tools they want or the JS magnifier they want. They're kind of in the hands of the backenders. And that could be fine, but well, I have another idea. And this is basically just a map or what, because we talk backend and frontend, but a lot of things is shared, and we all know different things, right? And if in a project, some colleagues have full stack developers, and that's, well, a full stack developer should be everywhere, and I don't think anyone is everywhere, because you usually have some scope that then it could be server side and client side, but usually you have some sort of defined scope. And the reason for splitting up front-end and back-end work is simply so that the one most suited to do the work can do it. Let's see. Often find someone who's great at accessibility and SQL queries, SQL queries. That's an unusual combination. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but so there's always some. But of course, this problem is around people, but still tools and processes can help, because you can make a project work with any setup, but it's really about the people and the cooperation. And these are examples of management. You can have full stack developers only, but as I talked about, full stack developers, well, I would say there aren't no such thing. You have people with a lot of skills that can be used for many things, both in the front end and back end, but you're always specialized on something, and I think it's you won't solve all the problems with that. Also, front-end works in CMS. That's your approach. We talked about that and the limitations. And the static front-end, which usually leads to you're very fast making that static HTML and CSS, and the front-end is done, but then is the frustration, because it's hard to do front-end. You have so many concerns to take care about. You have the accessibility, and it needs to look good on every device, and also the backend needs something. It needs something that can be rendered in a good way. It has limitations on how the market could look, and when you start to exchange stuff between front-end and back-end, every time there's a context switch, and it takes time, and it can be a lot of time in the projects. So the idea to help us with this, it's not the solution, but to help us with this, is to use handlebars instead of razor templates to prevent code from ever entering the templates, and make it easier for front-end developers to work with templates instead of static HTML. Anyone heard about handlebars? You have? Yes. And use the JSON as a model and contract between the templates and the CMS. I'm going to show you a little bit what this, but this helps by creating a common thing in the middle that you can talk about when you're discussing the component or a page or whatever. What is the markup and what is the data that's going to end up in the markup? You have that in a traditional project. You have the data in a C# class, and you have the markup in Razor templates. But I find this a little bit better when the model is just a simple JSON object. It's only plain strings and plain values. And that is combined with a template in handlebars format to create the markup that's rendered on the site. And that as an idea, but you need something to make it work easy. And that's how Fractal enters. Anyone heard of Fractal? No. It's kind of a tool for building a component library for the web. You build components for reuse in other sites, and a component library to pick components from when you're developing a new site. So that's what it's built for. But in this case, the use is a little bit different. But it provides this handlebars and JSON combination, and it provides it well for us to use for this purpose. So I'm going to show you a bit code and what it does. But I think I'm going to save that until the end, I believe. Let's see, okay. So this is Fractal. Fractal is a web application built in Node.js. Ah, sorry. We jumped back to... Sorry. No, it's ticked. Yeah. Okay. So this is Fractal. What did I say? It's a web application built in Node.js, built for designing web components to be reusable. It's a simple file structure to define the components, and some Node.js initialization stuff. It's you can use your linter or your SAS compiler as you like with Node.js, and what Fractal does is just provide the tooling and the GUI to make this easy to work with. So I can create a new component called KDS, and I create handlebars file, and I get an instant feedback from what I edit. And to that handlebars file, I add the context, either in YAML or JavaScript. We make a JavaScript one. Let's see if I had. stay that one. I can create a name for the component and then the data context. To do something easy, I could just something like that. So it's very simple in theory, and it's a very simple tool. But it makes this concept easier to work with, rather than have to render or something, because you get instant feedback all the time. Let's see, and also what is available is that you could define something called variants, which is an array of objects where you can add a name of the person and then add a context of a person Peter. And what you get here is a variant entered, and that model that I defined here overlaps the one defined in the base. So if I don't have to city there again, and if I change the template to you see that even though I'd select a variant, because I don't override the city in this variant, so you only have to specify differences in the variants. And this is useful for things like a very long text or short text or images of different sizes. You want to test your front-end work with different data. You can do this in a very easy way without having to duplicate the markup. Just enter different data. I also found it useful when you have some problems with the design on the site. I as a backend developer, I see the problem. I just create a variant here with that displays that exact problem, and then I can pass it on to front-end developer and say this will have to work. This data has to work and look nice, and it's very easy for them to fix it. Handlebars, for those who aren't acquainted to handlebars. Handlebars is a very simple language. You can insert data, you can do if, you can do each, you can render a sub-template, and that's basically it. Sometimes it's good because there's no possibility there will end up code in this. Sometimes it's a bit, well, I had on the project, I had like some things that were going to be collapsed if there were less than 3 items in the list. No, they should be expanded if there were less than 3 items, of course. And you have to create a property in the model that's list has more than 3 items because you can't compare the number of items in the list to the constant tree. That's not possible. And then, of course, you won't code, but I think the benefits are what do you say? The benefits are larger than the drawbacks. Also in handlebars, you don't, or in and that's an inheritance from JavaScript. If we create a complex type like address or something like a street, blah. and well, do sit again. I have no imagination. Oslo. And street. Okay, that output is something, but if we then create a new variant, name, no address, crap. Address is no. That was not what I expected. Yeah, but if we take the no address, you don't need anything like checking for null values and so on, because it just silently defaults to output an empty string. And of course, to get rid of the city and the street, you could make if address, which just checks the JavaScript truthness of the variable, which is not always simple, but so everything disappears. But then again, and this becomes nice when you have things like this could be a link, or it isn't a link because we don't have a URL, and which are often missed in the static HTML because you don't, well, all can be handled with doing a clear specification and so on. There are different ways of handling this, but this is what I'm showing right now. So for an example, we could try, I've installed a version of the Alloy site. And on the Alloy site is a contact block, which just displays an image, an H3. It renders the contact page, and that's down here. And to do this in handlebars, you first, of course, need the context. You need an image with an URL. And you enter example data. You have some alt text. And that's basically what we need for the image. We have a title. That's KDS. Again, are you with me here? Title, and then comes the property page stuff, this stuff, which is P, and then you have like a contact with the page name, contact page name. We have a phone number, phone number, text first, which is just phone. We have a phone number. don't like this keyboard. We have an email text of email, and we have email of and we have possibly a link. A link. URL. Something like that. And then we have a text for non-selected. If we haven't. So that's basically a simple model for something as simple as a contact block. And then we need a markup for it. So we have a div with a class contact. We have a image tag with and we have an alt text. Ah, crap. Something like that. Missed something. We have an H3. And then comes the contact page, which is down here. So that's paragraph. And I'll put the what did I call that? Contact point dot page name, and then just the phone contact point text. Something like that. Emails, and then comes then is the link, which if we have a link, if what do I call that? No, sorry. Link. If link, I spelled that with K, didn't I? Yeah, it's terrible. Link, it's spelled with a K. Ah, sorry. Create an anchor. Something like that. See if that works. I doubt it will. Yes, it did. Doesn't look exactly right now, but sorry?
Contact
Sorry. I didn't realize that. Contact.
And the techniques and the same file.
See if we get a link as well. Yeah. I don't care about the look now. It doesn't look right, but it will look better when we get to EPIserver. Let's see. I need to manage time. Well, and now we can do stuff like, if this was an actual design, we could do stuff like, okay, we remove this. How does it look without a link? This will be exciting. Contact link. Crap. I'm a C# developer. I forget. So. And this is kind of exciting how Fractal handles it. It normally one should believe that doing this assigns a new object to contact and we lose all the other properties. But it doesn't do it that way. It doesn't do it like that in lists either. It checks the object and just replaces the properties that are in the variant. But you get the point, right? Do I need to show this anymore? No. But then, the interesting part is, can we use this template in EPIserver instead of making this into a razor template? And yes, we can. And there's an implementation of handlebars in .NET, a pure .NET which compiles the handlebars to like a CLR class, and it's pretty fast. It's well, normally the rendering of templates isn't a performance bottleneck in any site. It's the getting data part that takes time, but it's reasonably fast and works well. There are of course things to be addressed with EPIserver, but just the simple thing is something like this, like a block, because you don't have to worry about common parts and so on that you need to do on the page. You need to handle the menu, which you want to reuse on every page, and you want to, so the complexity of course rises. But this is the controller for the contact block, and I created some helper classes that we used in this project to allow us to render the templates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to inherit handlebars block controller base instead. I need to add something to the just because the issue you're going to hit when you do this is that everything is in EPIserver that regards like page references and blocks and so on are made to be used in a template with an HTML helper. And in the controller we don't have an HTML helper. So this core thing is for just a few utility methods to help us actually make this model work. And then in this is alloy. Yeah, you know that. So this is a contact block model. So we're just going to try to replace that with our own model. And because we're using a JS definition or a JSON definition of the data, that kind of marries well with anonymous types in C#, if you're aware of them, of those. Because what you can do is just take the context, so you have something to I'm just doing it because I only have one screen. I need something to look at. Okay, we need an image with two properties, a new anonymous type. We have an URL, and that is, we have to resolve an URL to current block image. And we need an alt text, and that is, we don't have that in this, we haven't a property for that, so you just have to make it a static text. We have a title, that is title, name, no, heading. We have contact, which also is a object with, and then we need the contact page, but luckily enough the old code already fetched that for us, so we just use page name, contact page name, phone number text, was this. I'll find the keys for those later. Phone number, contact page, phone, email, text, email, everyone knows what the question mark does. Yeah. We simply just doesn't have to care about if it's yeah, email, and then we had the link, external, no, I forgot about this. Anyone got a guess? But it's not on the contact page, right? It's on the block. There. So Yeah.
The model is missing help.
Something else.
You're missing the mute.
Yeah, sorry. Hey!
Collaboration.
Yeah. It's hard to do. Well, it's actually, the code becomes nice, but the drawback of doing it like this is it's just one step in the code. Boom. And it does everything. So it's hard to, if there's an error in the middle, it could be hard to debug. So if it's like that big, you can use this method, but then you need to start to split it up. And you could just, the way I've done it is like if we want to split up contact, then we just move that and make a variable. And then so you don't make everything in one hit, because if you have a few selects in there and then we need to render the handlebars template. We remove those. Can talk about those later. I have 15 minutes. We return content of this handlebars view with the path, components, contact block, contact block HPS and the model. One more. So, because when we're in EPIserver, of course, this is just example data for the model. This is just a specification or for the front-enders to be able to experiment with the design and see how it behaves in different ways. But when EPIserver renders the template, it just uses the template. It doesn't care about the other stuff and see if this works. Component, contact block. Yeah, it could work.
Is EPIserver gonna reload or parse the data to the new template if you edit the template now?
In debug, yes,
Yeah, okay.
but not in release build. The template engine is instanced per HTTP call in debug, but is a singleton in release for performance. But you still want to be able to edit without restarting EPIserver. See if it's response. Yeah. That's some. That's not a problem with the template. Yeah, sorry, it was. Sorry, yeah, of course. Let's see. Yeah, remove the samples. Let's see. That one. Yeah. I think I can try to write that myself. We don't have the no entry text either, but I think that will fail gracefully. And this is why I do it. This is an Alloy site out of the box. It takes with a local database. Still takes forever to start. Well, perhaps it starts sometime. I can talk about this in the meanwhile, because if you work with EPIserver, you know that the default behavior is that every block you can set it with, and every block is wrapped with a div with a special class to set the block with. This is often forgotten by front-end developers, that this is possible, or that the block need to contain this. But with handlebars, if you want to, you could like add a prop to every context that is epi div class. That is a call sm tar. And then use, this is the preview template that when you display things in Fractal, this is rendered around the component. And then we have added a div which outputs that class. So, which means that we can make a variant with name of with context and then we get a half width. This will do nothing to the actual layout in this example, but we could use the inspector to see that it got a 6. As well, putting other div that needs to be every default EPIservice puts a div around the entire block area, and but this. There are of course stuff to be handled with the like edit mode on page edit. This is rather simple now in EPIserver. You just need to add an extra attribute to your DOM element to tell what property it is, and the Epi GUI picks it up and just do the magic thing. So things like the title would actually be a value, and EPIEdit class. You don't have to care about that here, but just output it somewhere. I don't know what I answered, but something like that. Or if it's just a class name. So it was harder before with EPIservers, like 11.3 or something. They made it just a single attribute to handle everything. Before that, there were multiples to get the edit to work. And then the render content area, of course, is a challenge. Fractal can register helper methods. So block rendering and content area rendering is done through a helper. So we insert a helper in the Fractal template and example content. And then when EPIserver renders the template, it replaces the example content with the actual content rendered from the content area. So that works. As well with on-page edit for blocks. Most things have been handled. Do you have any questions? We're running out of time. Nothing.
Yeah, do you use this in Sweden?
Yeah, we well, it worked. had a slide on that. I think it worked pretty good. It depends on what you compare to. If you compare to static HTML, import that into the front end just creates static HTML, and then the backenders need to pick the parts and make a Razor template out of it. This worked better. But it isn't a magic bullet. There's still a lot of problems, of course. I had a few of them. Let's see. It doesn't want to switch screen. Of course, it adds complexity. I think it's a fair trade-off because front-end can work with Node.js, they can work with the tools they like, they can be empowered to create a great front-end application, but they need to learn Fractal. So, well, it's always like that when you've learned something and you know exactly how it works, and you think like, everyone is just going to understand this as well as I did. I only worked with it for 2 months, and they should understand it directly. It doesn't work like that. Things leak between the EPIserver and the handlebars templates. Things like dates. Do you want dates to be formatted? Ideally, they would be formatted in Fractal, and we just send a date object. In practice, we outputted formatted date from the backend. Then we used the handlebars.net, which is the .NET implementation of handlebars. Fractal uses handlebars.js, and they are close, but not exactly the same. And that was the reason for some pain. But what I think was good with it was that just this model. When I as a backend developer needed to discuss something with a front-end developer, we looked at the model. Okay, what do we have here? Oh, what is that property? Well, okay, yeah, you need to look at that, and you need to. And often we could. This was a special project because we had an existing site with existing blocks, existing pages. So in practice, we. Backend developers looked at the existing block definitions and so on and created a model and some markup just as example use of that model to see, so the front end could see what they should iterate over and what they should need to be able to handle null values and so on. And then we passed them over and they could finish something that looked good. And it worked fairly well. Any other?
Certain difficulties that would come in handy in, situation that you come across in Epic projects?
Well, there were 2 parts of the project that was left in Razor because this is a controller thing. You can mix and blend Razor and handlebars. You don't have to decide. But of course, if you go and have the site template in handlebars, that's a step, and make all the common parts work. But we left one part with Razor that was for like information screens that shouldn't change, and we didn't see a point in remaking them in handlebars, and epiforms. I wouldn't go down that route. It isn't worth it, I think.
Replacing epiforms with handlebars sounds like.
Yeah. It's not going to go well.
Yeah.
A lot of pain, and for not much worth either, because you could still render the epiforms block in the handlebar site template. There's no problem with that. So just that part is still Razor, or ASPX, I believe, in some parts. It's not even Razor. 3 minutes. we end up early then. Thank you.